Well, just to maybe start off in the realm of astrology, which I do as a day job. And I know astrology is sort of limited because there's a lot more planets, there's a lot more than the zodiac. But because we were born in this human realm, it's sort of the initial map that we can work with to begin to poke a hole into the unified field and start to expand into much more through different gateway planets like Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune. So the South Node energies, which have to do with the past, it has to do with the energy signature we were born with. Well, if we look at it on a collective level, the South Node that kind of represents where we've been as a humanity has had Pluto, the planet of death, rebirth, alchemy, and transformation, very close to it, and also Saturn. And it'll form an exact alignment of a conjunction January of 2020, but it's still close enough to be influencing us. And so Saturn, if we look at the way Saturn operates, the lower level of Saturn energies has to do with the Saturn moon matrix and this sort of mind control, this sort of system that we've been incarnating into, different control agendas that aren't so visible to the naked eye, even though it's, obvious there's a lot going on with, different government leaders and different things on the world stage. There's obviously many, many hidden layers behind that, and dark technologies that have been utilized in order to create this sort of system that we're in. So we're not just picking up on belief systems. We're not just dealing with the programming from television or just our ancestral patterns. The earth grids have actually been manipulated, and planetary energies have been manipulated, so that we're born into something that automatically kind of throws us into digression. I mean, right. We're born babies and we're pure and we do this, but I mean, pretty much right off the bat, we're bombarded. There's that whole vaccine question, and I know that's controversial, but just look at how children are raised, mostly in front of the TV, mostly in a school system that tries to direct the intelligence and consciousness of that being without considering that that person might be carrying, advanced energies that relate to incredible spiritual gifts and abilities, or right. Higher levels of wisdom that aren't going to fit into the box of the school system. So this particular planetary alignment that has been taking place, really starting around, earlier this year, has really created this massive purging. So if we look at Saturn, okay, so that has to do with control matrix. The higher levels of Saturn, when it starts to move out of the lower levels, which is up to us as individuals, takes us into the energy of teacher and master, a person that's able to overcome obstacles, a person that's able to set their own rules and limitations so that it serves the vessel, so it serves the consciousness, right. So that we can thrive, versus things that repress us, control us, block us, and limit us. So we're kind of enlightening Saturn as individuals. And so a lot of people on a personal level are going through massive purges, lots of shifts, lots of healing of ancestral patterns, old wounds from childhood, maybe things that they agreed to or signed up for that just doesn't serve them anymore because they're having this awakening. As we see things change on the world stage, people are starting to have much more of an open mind than they did before about some of the stuff that the conspiracy people have been talking about. And so what's happening outside can't help but impact a person, personally. And so to me, it's a major transformation of Saturn, and it's an alchemical process that we can harness this and we can work with it to become much, much better, or we can actually get caught up in the web of deception by believing everything we see in the news. And that's not really happening. If we look on social media, I mean, everything is being mocked and made fun of the minute it becomes news. It's like, oh, that's a lie. Oh, that's not really him. Oh, he's probably still alive. Oh, that's not a suicide. Nobody's falling for this bait anymore. So anyway, I don't want to overly answer the question, but we're just in a massive period. Basically, we're in a stellar activation cycle, and it has different stages. But basically, the geophysics of the planet is such that the stargates are able to open, which connect with our own galactic chakras and our dormant DNA that is ready to get switched back on. And so ascension symptoms are very, very heightened right now and can be very misunderstood. And that's why it's really important that we have as much clarity as possible so that we can move through these initiations without losing our minds. And exactly. I always felt that it was inevitable. The human race is going to, have to wake up. And I've been really devoted to accepting nothing less, but also trying not to have expectations either, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. I was definitely downloaded this mission when I was a kid, and I've been really intent on it. And I've been trying to share these kind of things ever since high school. And I was just sort of a laughingstock, which is fine. But it's like something's got to give. I mean, if we look at it, it's a very organic process. It's a cosmic and earthly event. very similar to different stages of development we might go through, going from baby to toddler to child to adult. It's like, these are organic things related to cycles, related to, but then there's a very complicated history too, riddled with all sorts of galactic wars and things that have stepped down into here. So when I was talking about Saturn Moon Matrix, they actually have all these dark technologies to make it very, very difficult to be awakened. So the pressure of keeping the lid on is reacting to the surge of truth that wants to pop out. And so it's creating like this feeling of purging. I was actually in Hong Kong, and my flight almost got canceled. I almost was stuck there because the protests were starting to get closer to where we were. Oh. And I got out just in the nick of time because now the airport's closed and I just got home not too long ago.
Oh, wow.
So that was really interesting to be in that part of the world with all that going on, at a UFO conference, being a speaker, that are, ready to accept this sort of information. And the thing is, it's all in our DNA. Everything. Well, we probably would be, right. we probably would have done it a long time ago if we didn't have all this interference, if we weren't taking advantage of. So it's kind of like our growth has been stunted. And for us to be able to get over the hump, we have to kind of look at, well, what is that? What is the root of it? Where does it like to target us? And what is it playing on, right? So we're in this massive sort of mind control society, but it's taken on many forms. And a lot of it is just to keep us divided. So it's not so much about mind controlling us all to think the same thing. It's to actually create so much division and so much differences that we're constantly at war with each other. And that just never seems to end. So even just the nature of these dark agendas is to create two opposing sides that are battling instead of it being, it's not even about good guys and bad guys, because whatever species or race is thinking that they have the right to do something and that everybody else is the enemy, they don't feel like they're playing an evil role, but the one that's on the other side of it is going to see it as such. So to me, we have to win the war within ourselves. It's a war on our consciousness. So we have to, understand, where are we being played? Where are we being pitted against each other? Where have we lost a sense of integrity and authenticity? And how disconnected from nature are we? Because the natural part of it is answering to a lot of different wars and scenarios that it's the organic nature of the mother that has come in as an unconditional loving source that wants to help souls not be completely modified and taken over to the point of no return. And so we have this Mother Earth energy. We're kind of in this holding tank of being able to awaken to who we truly are, what we're made of, what our junk DNA really is, and all these lies and distortions of history and different sciences not giving us the full picture. We're also dealing with a vibratory shift on this planet that is helping us to nurture ourselves back to wholeness. And we have to understand that without the mother energy, which has not been available, we've easily gotten immersed in this sort of addiction matrix. And they use different tactics to keep us sort of attached to the very things we want to let go of. So we have to realize we have to win the war within by understanding, where are we corded into the material realm, the money system, addictions, and some of it's fine. We have to find a balance. There's nothing wrong with money. There's nothing wrong with a lot of it, but we have to find, some sort of balance where we're just not in this survival and desperation to the point where we're masking the real issues that we need to look at. And once we get a grip on it, everything really flows, and it doesn't take much to upgrade our DNA. To me, it's like we've been zoo animals. Now the gates open, but so many people are afraid of their natural habitat. They don't want to go out and venture into it, even though it's completely natural and it's actually something much more compatible with their soul and their system. Yeah. But we've been so taught to turn the other way and just look to the prison warden or the zookeeper. And a lot of people have the opportunity to venture back into what's organic and what's real. But we're talking multi-generational, inheritances of, all sorts of genetic damage that actually could be healed if the energetic shift could take place within the consciousness to then bring it into the physical and upgrade the physical. Yep. Now spirit's more, the ether is available. It wasn't available before. There are tactics to affect the platonic solid dodecahedron, which connects to the ether, so that the circulation of energy wouldn't be in our favor and we'd be locked in our lower chakras more than to realize our self-worth has been targeted since we were children. How we feel about ourselves, our self-esteem is built upon a system that rewards us if we do this. But if we don't do this, we're outcasts, we're losers. And there's this whole duality that we've been fed that has affected the way that we view ourselves. And so even if we normally wouldn't have a judgment about something, we tend to carry stigmas that are very, they're locked in very early in our early conditioning. So I think we need to be radically authentic and not worry about what friends we lose, because without being totally true to ourselves, we're going to be easily played because it's a frequency. If we're in our truth, even if it doesn't look good, even if it's like, honey, I'm sorry, I'm so triggered, I'm having a really crappy day, and it's totally, at least it's honest instead of acting out some narcissistic personality.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
It's like, okay, I'm wounded. So are you. We're all wounded. So, the more, because the 13th sign, when the sun started to move through the 13th sign in 2010, it's actually connected to the element ether and also Chiron, the wounded healer, right? So for us to really connect in to this energy circulation that is going to help to upgrade us, we have to be willing to accept the wounds, the injuries, the deceptions, the lies, and the theft, and be honest with the pain and not deny it. Because this whole enlightenment thing that makes us feel shame if we're having a bad day or if we're angry or we're sad, I don't think is very fair, because I think it's a healthy response to all the BS that we're seeing. But it's not the end all be all. It's very temporary. But if we deny that part, then we're not going to be able to move through it. So I think we have to be very, very honest with processing and really find people that allow us to be ourselves, that really just are able to hold space, and we can do that, with them as well, and be that for them as well, and really build community and build a lot of these fractures that have taken place in what is called community and partnerships and our relationship with ourselves, and push the envelope to defy what is being dictated to us, which is to create drama and war and battle and power struggles between the sexes, and you name it. We need to take the upper hand and say, we don't have to follow that way. The best thing that we can possibly do is first start with being, really true to ourselves. Even if it doesn't, look that good, at least if we can handle our wounds in integrity, we won't be the person that continues the patterning of injuring others, because misery tends to like company, whether it realizes it or not. So I think there's all sorts of great things, changing the food we put in our body, working with the earth frequencies, crystal stone, the whole shebang of good tools and modalities. I use astrology as a tool just to get us out of the map, to help liberate us from the wheel. And I use it sort of not to keep us stuck in it, but what are the exit routes? How can we kind of get to the next level? I just think laughter is important. If it's a war that we need to win within, we have to check our own ego, because it's the negative ego that's been targeted. They only have access to our lower chakras. Once we start to expand beyond that, they do our fourth chakra as well. But once we start to activate the galactic and we start to switch on these dormant chakras and DNA, our energy body and our physical body starts to upgrade into a completely different form. And we start to light up aspects of our own DNA that gives us more sovereignty. And with that comes protection. Because only entities and parasites can feed on an imbalanced system and something that isn't in its wholeness, because any fracture or imbalance very much invites these things. So it's no different in the physical realm. If we don't clean up the dishes after we're done cooking, and we're surprised that there's flies and rats and mice or whatever, it's like we know energy maintenance in the physical realm because we can see it, but we forget about the mental, the spiritual, and the emotional. And we're walking around, with all this gunk, and all these entities are like, oh, I'm going to feed on that. And we just got to be determined and devoted to purification on all levels. And it's not easy. It's not going to be perfect. I'm like this a lot of the time, but once we devote, we got that extra support of synchronicity and the flow of beautiful universal forces that are here. And it's so funny because it's become one of those Ascension terminologies, getting a download. Well, that was kind of that was the nature of my childhood. And it was what the heck is this? But, you're a kid, so you don't really have anything to compare it to. You're just trying to be a child. But it was boom, 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 boom. All this stuff swirling around my head. Eisenhower showing up. And I'm being just given all this data about this particular window period, and that they're going to try and take you away. Don't go anywhere with them. Stay close to your mission and your truth. And, probably one of the only memorable times I recall having a connection with, higher dimensional beings, but it was more in a dream state. So it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Yeah. And a lot of times it's when you least expect it. It might be that enough things have been able to connect as dots. And then all of a sudden it's wow. I had a dream I solved the Rubik's Cube last night, which is weird, from the 80s, right? The Rubik's Cube.
Awesome.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of that, where everything is sort of lined up and it's it's ready to receive. It's ready to bring something in, cosmic, greater, higher mind intelligence. And it defies the stuff that we read that we're meant to regurgitate, or the things that have been, put upon us. Even, So my background, I lived in the wilderness for many years. My background was expedition leadership. But I knew that that wasn't what I was going to end up doing with it. But I needed the time in nature. I'd just gone to high school in Washington, D.C. area. And I was like, I got to recover. I'm going to go into the wilderness for a couple of years and do this kind of thing. And that kind of opening. And I'm not saying everybody needs to, go camping, but it's when you are able to receive, when you feel and know how connected you are to everything. Our DNA, our chakras, everything is connected to the earth grids, to the multidimensional cosmos. And we are a micro of the macro. And this overlay and genetic modification, all this stuff going on has produced a species that is so completely not what we're capable of being. So when we give ourselves, the chance to really breathe into the truth of how connected we are to everything, we get a lot of answers. And sometimes it's not answering a question as much as it's feeling yourself coming back in, because we're hardly really here. I mean, there's a portion of us here, but if we really were as grounded as we could be, we'd be vibrating, a lot higher. And so I had those opportunities along the way to really have myself be in enough alignment to bring in a lot. But sometimes, if there's a lot of stress or I'm overworked or I'm not taking care of myself, then I kind of lose that connection. And I'm more in my lower monkey mind, like stressing about stupid stuff. But it's just that aha moment where everything kind of makes sense. And it just kind of comes through where if you don't write it down and do something with it, it can really easily get lost. And so Facebook, right? It's like, so sometimes at 2 a.m, I'm writing a Facebook post because something came through. And then sometimes I'm like, this is really stupid. You got to delete it.
I'm going to have to friend you more and pay more attention to your posts there.
No kidding.
Yeah, I think we'd be a lot more surprised, what comes through. And so a lot of people are like, I don't know what I'm here to do. I don't know what my purpose is. I look at their chart. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like, you're so filled with this incredible energy. But I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing either, but I just write when I feel inspired. Sometimes I don't even know what's going to come out of me. And just putting together these presentations, it's like, I don't really have a plan, but it's just, there's something that's guiding me. There's synchronicity.
Absolutely. Yep.
There's something greater. And we all have that. Everybody has a higher mind that wants to come in. But if we don't exercise it, it's like an athlete. If the athlete is not going out and exercising, it doesn't mean that they're not an athlete anymore, but it might take them a day or two to get back up to speed, And so, and I think we're all powerful divine beings. And if we could just give ourselves just that little nudge to just exercise that part of us a little bit, then all of a sudden it's going to open up something huge and we're going to begin to feel inspired, healthier, more joyful, more grounded, more connected. And it's just about, taking that step and taking that leap. And some people have been doing that for a while, but then they get discouraged and then they might turn to a substance because they're losing patience with the rest of humanity. And it's just not easy at all. I can't say that I have it all completely figured out. I have my dips and my moments, but I just know that everybody has access to this. There's organic ascension signals or AI signals. And at any moment, at any given day or time, we have the opportunity to completely get out of that recycle system and that trap. And it's just a choice in the moment to just take that deep breath, to answer to your integrity, to be a beacon of love and light and healing energy for people, and to also be real. It's not about denying the dark. Our words, our fifth, when we talk about 5D, it's really our fifth chakra, because it's through our words we heal and uplift humanity. But we can also say things that offend people, hurt people, and damage them. So that's a huge responsibility to be given a voice. And so people need to be a lot more responsible with the words that they communicate, because you can literally make a person stay, give them, a blast of really good energy, maybe some, wisdom that isn't sort of obnoxious, uncalled for advice. I mean, there's just an art to it. And I think we have to realize that, like, we're a work in progress. We're going to put our foot in our mouth sometime, but if we can hold ourselves accountable and be humble enough to apologize and just keep the energy clean amongst each other, it's also going to keep our vessel clean, because that's a part of the energy maintenance too, because we all impact each other. So I think that level of accountability and responsibility is important. And if we mess up, the self-righteous sort of spiritual energies need to kind of be held in check, I'm noticing. But we all have our stuff. Everybody's got something. So
can you address the whole gender principle thing and talk a little bit about sacred union and how that's playing out on the planet right now with the distortions that we see with the gender?
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely like an agenda there. I think there's some that are definitely born with a level of confusion about the physical body they've been given. But I don't think it means that you forget the fact that you're actually in a vessel. It's like, what do we change the anatomy books? And I mean, obviously there's different parts. So, but it doesn't mean that soul orientation is going to resonate with what that's been called. So can't we just call something female, male, but the consciousness or soul of that being resonates more with, none of it seems to really matter. To me, I just think people need to be true to themselves. And I think it gets real complicated because sacred union, everything that is here to help us with ascension is being targeted. So there's always some kind of agenda, even the feminist movement, even just, sort of, there's some things, and I'm not trying to, negate all of it. I think it does have its place. I think Me Too absolutely has its place. But I think some things take our attention away from maybe the deeper stuff trying to come to the surface. But I think it's also a gateway for that deeper stuff to come to the surface because, it would be too much. All these atrocities have to be called out. Any form of abuse, I absolutely agree with it. But then there's a place where it's somewhat taken advantage of and somewhat twisted in a way that just doesn't feel right. I think there's definitely an agenda to mess with sexual energies and how we identify with gender so that the masculine and feminine principle can't come together. It has nothing to do with sexual orientation. It has to do with the energetic flow of our auric field, our right and our left, the torus field of our bodies, our right, like when we put our hands together, it's that circulation. So, whatever our sexual preferences are, we really do need to embrace this because it's no different than the electric and magnetic and what we see on the earth grids. The positive and masculine charge doesn't have to be looked at on a sexual level. And why people are putting it down in that little box without understanding the larger picture of what it means to balance these energies and have some kind of flow, I think is making people unhealthy because they're either rebelling against society and the programmings that have taken place beforehand. Then you get this rebellion like, oh, well, let's not have gender at all. It's like we're reacting to a programming with the programming. And so if we could just let go of all of it and just be ourselves and be true to ourselves, call ourselves whatever. But I think creating a whole societal shift where they're actually having toilets for days, it's a little hard for me to wrap my head around right now. I don't want to be judgmental. And it's just, I was a tomboy, whatever. I have a husband though. But I could say I totally relate to my male energy. I don't need to go to a male bathroom to prove a point. I got female parts. Big deal. If a person wants a sex change, I totally do whatever you got to do, but we don't have to. It's similar to like gurus saying polyamory is important. If you don't like it, you're a prude. It's like, go do what you're going to do, but don't create like a whole thing about it where you're trying to convince people to do something that they might not want to do. So it's like, it's one thing if it's up to the individual. It's another thing when it becomes a societal thing or in a group or a cult or I just think it's dangerous. And I guess I can learn to live with the day thing, but I don't know. What do you guys think? Need a massive deprogramming before we even begin to step into like a mindset that would create such huge alterations of perception of the physicality of what we came in with. And I don't know, open up like a more real dialogue because it just really, why can't we just, be ourselves? Obviously we've dealt with patriarchy, distortions, the exile of the divine feminine, and also the feminine, programmed by certain energetics that have kind of fed into it a bit and, or decided to kind of like jump. It's both sides, both masculine and feminine. And so sort of this, I don't want to call it victim mentality because we're all entitled to have our little moments of feeling like a victim, but I'm just not into like the male slamming. Like I'm not into seeing it like, oh, it's all been, men this whole time. And I like to step back, just like you guys, and just be like, what is the programming here? What the agenda is patriarchy programming, but it's affected both genders. And so if people decide, well, in order to overcome that, we need to drop gender, then we're actually not really deprogramming at all. And so I think we need to help people feel real comfortable with just who they are and their own unique expression without having, it's just like beyond me. Our DNA, in order to heal it, is masculine and feminine. It's got 12 masculine codes and 12 female. And it's all related to the elements. The nucleic acids of the DNA actually relate to earth, air, fire, water, and the mitochondrial DNA connects with ether. But in order for it all to flow together and upgrade us, the masculine and feminine do need to come into balance. But we don't have to look at it like gender as much as just wholeness, balance, like you said. And that's going to look different for everybody because we've got, other lifetimes, other things that we might be working on balancing out or correcting, or different types of experiences that we need in order to live out a certain storyline to help us define our core again, to help us define our divine center. I think the most important thing is that, out of all things that we should be solving right now, I don't think it's like putting in another bathroom stall for days. I think it's just sort of like a distraction, because there is such a push to create sacred union that it's just being redirected in a way that I don't feel is healthy. Because why would you raise a child not feeling comfortable identifying with the body that they were given? Oh, we'll just give we'll call you they. It's like, I mean, whatever your sexual preference is, we're talking differences that we can tell. It's like saying vegans now, like, you have brown hair, let's just pretend you don't. We'll just call it blank, It's just, it's creating a massive denial. It's like, okay, so you were born into this body. You don't identify with it, but why not? It's still your vessel. You can love whoever you want. Doesn't matter what your sexual preference is. And if it's really that bad, yes, there's certain cases that I agree. Maybe you should go under the knife and get some surgery. I'm not that person. I can't say. But for it to be an agenda that's streaming out to people, this level of confusion, I think it's a total distraction away from this balance we desperately need, because sacred union has always been targeted. The hieros gamos and the, ancient knowledge of the importance of union and the alchemy that it creates and our ability to be, very advanced souls based on these principles. Everything that's taken place with these dark technologies is to create that separation and division. And this agenda to me is just absolutely dangerous. And I just can't imagine raising a child taking that away or saying, oh, they need to find themselves first. It's just like, but they still landed in this physical body. They can still find themselves. Don't be a control freak parent. Just guide your child, love them for who they are, but allow them to be what they were born into. Yep. It's like saying, let's deny that it rains every day and we'll just pretend it's always sunny. Let's just call it nothing weather. Yeah. So, let's tell us it's junk, and then we're not curious. It's like, oh, it's just useless. It's like, which makes zero sense. And actually, all these dormant strands are connected to higher harmonic universes. So if we're going to ascend, those dormant strands need to be switched on, or else we're not going to be able to perceive anything but the level that we're carrying. Fortunately, our consciousness can go beyond the physical. Sometimes it takes a while to upgrade the physical because it takes consistency. And there's a lot of things that like to trip us up and throw us off no matter how awake we are. But I do feel like there's been designation, but it ended up, I feel like the elites, or what I've come to research and understand, is through the use of these dark technologies, or using technologies in a dark way is a better way to put it, and trying to manipulate timelines and using quantum access technologies to locate past events, to try and change past events, which is not easy to do, and direct the narrative through these level of manipulations, things like CERN as well, and just Project Looking Glass and all these different things that they have, and Nephilim reversal grid. It's become a vampiric system where it relies on us for a food source. And because, there's hybrids connected to the reptilians and alliances connected to negative factions of the Anunnaki and different groups. I mean, there's, controller groups. I don't quite know their dynamic, and I can't quite say for sure where they are today. But these alliances that have shifted and changed over time has basically been to, feed something. So if we look at, even the Khazarian mafia, the roots of the Illuminati, they have this whole thing of feeding Moloch, sacrificing babies. And when we look at adrenochrome and all these different things going on at the elitist parties, I mean, I just interviewed Tony Rodriguez and it was shocking. And I won't go into it. I don't want to name names, but he wouldn't mind. It just, when you hear, and Epstein too, that these parties and these things that they're doing to kids, these enslavement things, sexual slavery with young kids, with these powerful elitists, are actually also connected to secret space programs. They use some of those kids for those reasons. So basically, a child which has that purity and has that energy is like a prize and a commodity to be traded and bartered, to be passed around. So something got really out of control, and I agree. I think it did start off benevolent. I know that there were some groups that came in that had an ability to play sort of the leadership role, sort of the parenting role, but they ended up getting infiltrated somehow because they had Orifim and reptilian DNA, and somehow the reptilians got in and created this trauma-based mind control stuff, and then was able to possess their bodies through fragmentation and trauma, which is what they're trying to do to all of us as humans. All these world wars that have been fought, all the traumatic things that we experience. It's kind of a tough one. There is a lot of sort of conflicting information. The viewpoints of like William Cooper and Statz and Friedman, for example, isn't quite the same when it comes to the MJ12 documents. So that's where it gets a little confusing about what started and when. And I've always been close to my family, but it's not like we sit around drinking champagne or wine talking about secret space programs, Project Paperclip. We try and just keep everything sort of at a kind of light, if you know what I mean. So I haven't got a lot of information about exact kind of facts, except for my own research and personal experiences being recruited to go off planet in 2006. And basically, we're dealing with, the biggest thing was Project Paperclip that really just set the stage for this infiltration coming into the United States. There were, things that Eisenhower and Truman were, trying to negotiate as far as what Truman's intentions were. A lot of times these people are being used as tools anyway. They're not really being told everything. And a lot of it had to do with, after Admiral Byrd tried to invade the Antarctic bases to take down the Nazis, they had to negotiate. The negotiations weren't going anywhere. And then they flew ships over the White House, I think, in 1952. And then here we're dealing with ET government treaties, but those actually originated way before Eisenhower. And he's sort of inherited the Google search for some reason about him being the most associated president with these treaties, but they actually originated from what I've come to understand that I feel really confident about, that they originated with Churchill, Winston Churchill, Crowley, and Hitler. And Hitler being mind controlled through the Tavistock Institute, Churchill being dragged. So we're dealing with something that is a lot older. Even Phil Schneider talks about it being known that there was government ET relations as early as 1936. Some have mentioned even earlier than that, 1932, maybe 1922. But it's always been there. It's just been hidden, right? So the ET government treaties seem to come later with this sort of emergence of the secret space program, which ended up getting infiltrated. I think there was some well-intentioned agendas at some point that just, didn't end up, lasting. So I guess, the story with Truman is when he handed the baton to Eisenhower, MJ-12 was already set up, or it was just in the works of getting made. But the Project Paperclip and sort of the deeper layers of all of that, basically Hitler ran off somewhere from what I've come to understand. And they aligned with a different faction of the Nazis. They lost control of Hitler and they were like, okay, he's useless to us and whatever. So there were two other characters that ended up being the big players of this Project Paperclip thing that ended up infiltrating the United States, connected to the Montauk Project and other mind control projects. And they seemed to get their hooks completely and totally into some of these secret groups. So these technologies were being taken off planet and being used just for a certain number of individuals, while the rest, was pretty much compartmentalized away. Because Eisenhower wanted to invade Area 51. He wanted to find out what the heck was going on. And so I just feel like Truman was in that really awkward place of setting up a few things without having maybe the bigger picture knowledge, things like the three-letter organizations, NSA, CIA, all that stuff. And Eisenhower did set up the Jason Scholars, I know that, and they were talking about alternatives 1, 2, and 3. Alternative 3 being colonizing Mars, going off planet, supposedly with the Zeta group that were service to self, that presented themselves as a dying race, trying to,
Was the other alternative deep underground military bases?
Yeah, that's alternative 2. And supposedly alternative 1 was blasting a hole in the atmosphere to release pollution. And so some people think that's the ozone layer, and they actually did do that, or the ozone hole.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh, wow.
So, it was just, he tried to win the Second World. He tried to defeat the Nazis, and our history books don't reflect the fact that we never really got rid of the Nazis. There's been a massive infiltration in the United States. I would say Truman was definitely a bridge, but I think every president has their hands tied. There's not a whole lot they can do, but I don't know if I'd necessarily, trust Truman. Sometimes I wonder certain things about Eisenhower along the way, and I'm not afraid to look at things that are difficult to look at. I actually started off with he ran off to Argentina, but I think that was where he supposedly ran off to. And it's just the problem is it's who can a person believe? So I almost feel like at this stage in the game, there's so much entanglement, there's so much confusion, there's so much disinformation plants coming in to just make it so difficult to get to the bottom of anything. That at the end of the day, what are we, kind of left with? It's like looking at a really, really gnarly childhood and saying, how much are we going to drag out, trying to heal it and overcome it? Is there another approach that we can take as a humanity to keep these battles? Because like you said, it's going to be a trigger word. And maybe all the comments, the people that love Hitler are going to get all mad at me. I'm just going by research, and I'm very, very careful about who I research. And I need to at least see it in 3 or 4 places. And I need to really know the person that I'm getting it from to feel confident about even sharing it. And then we're dealing with different timelines. For all we know, we're having different experiences about the history that we've all lived. The way I could answer that, definitely one of those things that I always tell people, take what resonates and leave the rest. We get as close as we can, any of us who do this kind of work, to the truth. What I've come to understand is, especially if we look at it like our 12 strand and beyond capacity, the Lyran system, the cradle of Lyra, where we were in our avatar consciousness. Okay, Lyra got attacked and stepped down into the Orion Wars, and also, exploded planets took place. So if we are looking at really the pivotal moments that shifted us forever and put us in the sort of scenario that we're currently in, I would say it comes down to the explosion of planets. The first one being Tiamat. Well, Lyra supposedly had a bunch of explosions. So all these different wars cause us to step down in dimensional energies, and we slowly get more and more modified by the trauma of war, by the loss of maybe a home planet that we identified with, being cast into maybe some other star system or some other group, or being even captured by the Orion Empire or whatever, being the resistance and trying to stop the dark forces. Maybe a lot of us carry an imprint of trying to stop it early on. So there's all these different scenarios, and we all have our different, stories and identifications. But when we look at it outside of all the storylines, when it comes down to it, we all have the capacity to carry, the full 12 strand and beyond. So the exploded planets, the reason it impacted us so much is because they held a feminine and masculine vibration. Like in mythology, they talk about Tiamat and Apsu. They held perfect balance. And when we also had like the 5D Tara seeding of humans, they were very advanced. It was like the original Atlantis and Lemuria, where it was very much the right and left being balanced, masculine and feminine energies being balanced and really working well together. So we hear about rebellions, and I don't want to say Lucifer rebellion without somebody, So it's not so much about the entity as much as like clearly some kind of event took place. And to me, it's a representation of our own negative ego, or our own ego playing with power, learning things about competition, power, war. If we're in a free will universe, we're going to play with that. It's inevitable that we're going to play with it to the point of probably making a huge mess for ourselves, because we're trying to understand, what it means, how to utilize it, what we can get away with and what we can't. So there's greater cosmic and natural laws, which is what's bringing us back to center. Because to me, it's all about like a game of lost and found, really. And we're really like holding the full like story. We just need to reconcile these archetypal battles within ourselves to generate unity consciousness and begin to heal all these fragmentations, because we're all born into this gaping wound. So the exploded planets threw the masculine and feminine off. And then when it formed this planet Earth, and Maldek was the masculine counterpart of the Earth. And then that ended up exploding. So even on a planetary level, that balance of the masculine and feminine was lost. And that's why we were so easily taken advantage of, because we all hold seeds of trauma connected to being a part of a system that might have been advanced that got infiltrated. So why all this infiltration? Well, my theory is that because we're in a free will universe, the differentiation of the masculine and feminine created a bit of a duality and polarity, and it just invited this warring race to come in. Just like when we're not in balance, how I was talking about before, it attracts like entities or attack. So the lesson is to come back into balance, because if we're in balance and if we're unified, it's like the immune system of the planet's increasing, and the parasitic forces cannot occupy something like that. They can only occupy where they can feed, as far as I'm concerned. Not all reptilians, of course, are negative, and anything that appears negative is usually the thing that's trying to kill us. But in its own mind, it's no different than the things that humans might decide to. We have to understand there's a greater ecosystem on a galactic and cosmic level, but do our best to know what that is so we can, protect ourselves. But I would say those core explosions and those original wars stepped down into this physical plane. Lots of refugee races came in that wanted to take control. A lot of the other refugees consider themselves star seeds, but they're not in service to self, so they can see that they're from someplace else, they don't belong here. But they're not ruthless, they're not power hungry. They just see themselves as star seeds, where others that have stepped down these wars into the physical plane have modified us, have tinkered with our DNA, and have put technologies to impact the earth grids in the same way implants impact our nervous system. It's because it's a free will universe. So if the masculine and feminine, which used to be like one, if we look at like the pleroma or the Ein Sof or whatever, and then you kind of have this differentiation. It's a little bit more personified. It has, free will. The experimentation of what that means, when you have guardian groups and then fallen races, fallen groups that are playing with power in a less than, where the seeding of the human race, there's like a competition, ones that want to guide them and help them to stay connected to 0 point unified field, and others that want to, play the role of God and put like a veil there so that they can be the rulers, and act like they're the true gods and that there's nothing before them. And that goes into the demiurge, it goes into Sophia, it goes into all these kind of things. It's so complicated, but when I try and simplify it for myself, there's certain planets or galaxies, that are very much hive mind, and they're not negative, but they don't have free will. So they're all part of a collective, and they all kind of think alike, and they all share, and it's very unified. And it's actually, some of them are very, very healthy. Some like to kind of infiltrate and try and pull us in, I guess, is how that works. But because it's a free will universe, it's sort of like, okay, we can kind of do whatever we want. But along the way, we're going to learn things like karma or cosmic and natural laws that create correction, not punishment. Punishment is just a construct through religion to cause fear. I believe that we get corrected and that we learn lessons so that we can become better people, but not in a sort of, we've been very vulnerable as humans. And I think that the true source creator energies that actually occupy this Mother Earth, because a portion of the mother came into the physical to make sure we wouldn't get lost for good, is nothing but unconditional love and tenderness and forgiveness and compassion. And it's also a very hostile earth. If we look at nature, you put on a nature show and they're ripping each other to shreds, a lot of those animals. So there's a recycle system that's organic, that's a part of nature. And then there's one that's a part of this archonic system that's the overlay. And so they're kind of at war with each other. That's why the divine feminine energies have been so demonized, so exiled. And the mother energy was not actually able to occupy the planet, because once we dropped down into this lower density and she morphed into the physical planet, based on a lot of research, what I found out, Atlantean cataclysms, Lemurian Holocaust, Nephilim wars, the Egyptian Sumerian invasion, all these different things, all these explosions, like threw the planetary axis off, and that connection with the rest of the multidimensional body was lost, and it got lost from us. That's why we're born with amnesia. So we're right there with Mother Earth as far as our rehabilitation and healing. But she's, obviously coming from, and it's with the he, it's in balance, it's sacred union, of course. But this particular Earth has a lot to do with the mother energy wanting to create a correction because of a lot of these rebellions and fallen races, that she decided to participate by becoming a planetary consciousness to help guide souls home. And that's why it was seeded as an ascension planet, so that we would be able to finally wake up and figure it out and be safe and go back to our true origins. So I just feel that because of a free will universe, it's like being in a relationship with somebody. That person can cheat on you, but do you have an agreement? Do you have a commitment, right? But he still has the free will to open his energy up, and so does the other person. It doesn't matter who, but things can be violated, right? So because of free will, somebody might think, oh, well, what harm is it going to do? I'll just keep it a secret, right? But it does a lot of harm. It creates trauma. So I kind of look at that as a cosmic issue, that we, like, the cosmos and all the archetypes need more therapy than anyone, as far as figuring out how to make balance and health and wholeness, because somebody's been sort of a cheater, like, oh, I wonder what happens if I do this. And the waves and the ripple effect infected and impacted so many different beings that it's taken on a lot of different forms, because then technology follows. How do we keep them in this lower state? Because now we can feed on them. Now they're not powerful anymore. Now they're under our domain because of these mistakes we made that caused trauma to the ones that wanted to hold some level of purity, like some of the higher ascended masters that don't have those fallen aspects that have created such destruction. We have to forgive them, though, because we carry some of that in our energy field as an inheritance. So instead of judging it or waiting for them to figure it out, we have to take it upon ourselves to do that inner work, knowing that we have bits and pieces of the whole cosmic story, as far as I'm concerned. That's how I mean. But we're all, there's so many of us that want justice, want the crimes against humanity to be exposed. But the thing is, if we target the actual individual that we feel is behind it, we're not understanding the bigger picture of probably the trauma-based mind control they went under, how they might have been possessed by a different entity, and that they're actually not even occupying their vessel anymore. And that, this massive infiltration, it's based on certain genetics and certain types of DNA, or what strands are available. I mean, that's all a bit complicated, but these hybrid families have that vulnerability to being possessed and taken over. So if we talk about forgiveness, I mean, it's radical forgiveness of the self, because we don't know what role we played in the past. We might have had to wear a dark hat and play the dark role, experience what it's like to act as a villain. We just don't know our full history to be able to sit around, throwing stones and having this level of judgment. So I think it's a major gift to give to ourselves, that if we can forgive ourselves, we can forgive everything, and learn to just move forward and like be the best person that we can be. That's the best statement that we can make to ourselves and the collective, that our way of forgiving is by saying, I'm no longer going to let you feed on me. I'm not going to have this bond with you anymore. I'm not going to be in agreement to this negative relationship. You know, we wouldn't want to be with an abusive partner. Why would we want to be with an abusive society and culture with all these backhanded deceptions? So I think part of forgiveness is not being the enabler, not having that connection anymore, and saying, I forgive you. And in that forgiveness, I'm able to let you go instead of try and fix it and heal it. Because I'm sorry, I don't think we're going to be able to heal some of these dark players. I think in a way they have to just lose the food source and then go to wherever they're going to go. We don't have to retaliate. We don't have to kill them, but we need to cut off the food source. Through forgiveness, I feel like we can let go. And that forgiveness is saying there's some things I don't understand. You know, I want to give the benefit of the doubt to the individuals that have been played and used, especially the darker forces, whatever catalyst you wanted to create, what it got out of control. Good luck wherever you're heading in the cosmos. That's pretty screwed up what you've been doing to human race for the last. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say.
Do you think there's sort of like a timeline split? Do you think there's sort of a parallel reality happening? I
do. I just, people who are really awakening and upgrading their DNA and really opening up to who they truly are. It's like you're not running the same frequency as the Matrix. People that want to stay stuck in the Matrix will stay stuck as long as they feel the need to stay stuck. The angry part, though, is the use of children, the abuse of children, and anybody. I mean, just the horrific, things. So we have to understand that there's a very demonic, energy here, and we need to be the purifiers of our reality. And it's we have to unhook in order to be able to be on the timeline that is positive. And one of the hardest things is that we don't want to leave anybody behind. What about our friends and family that aren't awake yet? Yeah. So I'm always thinking, well, let's leave breadcrumbs and footprints of gold and just kind of go and then dump some good energy from somewhere else and just be kind of like maybe a guide and not, give up on anybody. I don't think any soul deserves to be given up on, but I'm just really feeling the tension in my body almost every day. Like, I don't know how much longer until the split happens, because energetically it's getting more and more almost really painful to be here unless it starts to move in that direction. And while we're here, though, I just still feel the surge to do as much as I possibly can to just be not just a service, but just to be a community member, be a humble person of love, and just doing my best to help empower people, because we all have our own connection to truth. I don't want to act like I know something more than anybody else, but I do know what's really important is that we really join forces, because that's really going to create a split and some kind of bifurcation sooner rather than later. And maybe I'm just sounding impatient, but yeah, I can't imagine there not being a split. But with all this stuff changing on the planet, I think the ripple effect of great awakening is going to happen. But you're right. There's going to be a lot of trauma. There's going to be a lot of anger. People's foundation is being rocked to the core. And that's when we all have to stand up and be, the guides and the ones that help with that rehabilitation. No matter how angry family members get, no matter how angry somebody seems, I just think it's really important to directly forgive those people too, because they're the byproduct of these agendas. And we're going to forgive anything. We need to give, the humans that have been mind controlled or indoctrinated into this, just a big heart and acceptance of maybe the purging sort of like crazy exorcism they might go through. Not exorcism, but you know what I mean? Where for some it will be that, for others they won't know where to go. They won't know what to do. And so many of us, I feel, play a role to make sure we can all hold hands together. That we are very protective towards one another. There's a lot of smearing, there's a lot of infighting, there's a lot of drama, and we need to be the example. If we're going to be a community, we really need to be the example, because there's a lot bigger things to deal with as far as how humanity is going to react to this information. I just hope harmony and camaraderie can win in the end. And anyway, so I'm a cosmicgaia.org. You can join my podcast. I do call-in shows where I do your astrology, like little quick readings. And I do, readings. I'm kind of all booked up, but, I do a lot of shows just to make sure people get a chance to call in. And I keep my page pretty updated as far as the events I'll be doing. Obviously, I'll be at Dimensions of Disclosure. I'm doing a lecture and a workshop. I'm going to go really into detail with a lot of different pictures and charts about a lot of the stuff that we've been covering. And yeah, my real intention is, I know that we have magnificent potential And we all have our own storyline to help us to uncover what that is. And, there's things that can get in the way, and there's things that are available that can absolutely like blow us open in the most beautiful of ways. And I'm just completely devoted to assisting people through these different kind of tools. And yeah, check it out. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being on.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.